There can be no revolution without abolition, period. It cannot happen. So for people who think that they're revolutionary, but don't support abolition, you're up there now with Jews for Jesus in terms of contradictory belief system. So be very aware of that.
We have yet to address this significant story. We just haven't had a chance to, but we're going to address it now. So much of what we talk about is devoted to foreign policy, obviously. Not many channels do that, but we do. That doesn't mean that there isn't domestic policy that needs to be addressed, and this is a big one. And I know this is something that's been in your craw, so I think it is important that we recognize, even though Texas has always been, in terms of crime and punishment, Texas has always been at the forefront of the 50 states where they take pride in being cruel with how hard they punish.
Florida's up there. Florida is up there. It's basically the states across the South. Because at the end of the day, capital punishment is an extension of lynch law. So it makes sense that it would be more prominent in the South.
Yeah. And as What Democracy says, it is unmerciful. And that's basically what it is. Texas anti-ICE protesters convicted of terrorism charges, sentenced to at least 50 years in prison. Some, I think, were as high as 70 years in prison. Now, will this hold? Will there be appeals? Obviously.
Oh, there's already appeals.
Yeah.
The appeals are already, there are already appeals. And this is something that we had meant to get to last week or whenever this happened, but so many other things have come up. But this is by far the, I would say, most severe abuse of power we've seen in this country thus far regarding First Amendment. This is out of control. And I do not think that it will withhold on appeal. I was not in the trial, so I don't know what the grounds are that they're citing for appeal. But this, to me, is a violation of the Eighth Amendment. So, and if nothing else, and I'm sure there's a myriad of other statutes and codes that it is also a violation of, but this is a violation of the Eighth Amendment. For people who did not know, that's the Amendment Against Cruel and Unusual Punishment.
Yes.
And for First Amendment nonviolent protest. So, right, exactly. This is where we're at.
Activists accused of being part of Antifa get long prison terms in case seen as test of Trump's crackdown on dissent.
You know what? Let's do a poll. Because if Antifa is anti-fascist, everybody chime in the chat if you're Antifa. And if you are, can you let me know where the global or the national headquarters is, or where the meetings are? And you know, do we get to have like representatives on a board? So exactly, right? So, I mean, exactly. We're all going to be Antifa. It's so absurd. This is so silly.
Go for it.
A group of Texas protesters convicted of terrorism charges received unusually harsh sentences of at least 50 years in prison in a closely watched case that was widely seen as a test case of the Trump administration's efforts to crack down on dissent. After a 3-week jury trial, the 9 activists were all found guilty of a slew of criminal charges stemming from a 4th of July protest at an immigrant detention facility in Alvarado, Texas, south of Fort Worth. So this is from last year. The demonstrators arrived late at night with a plan to set off fireworks as part of a noise demonstration to show solidarity with those detained inside. A few of the protesters spontaneously broke off from the main group and vandalized cars in the parking lot, a guard shack, slashed the tires on a government van, and broke a security camera. When a police officer arrived on the scene and drew his weapon, because that sounds like a weapon would be needed for somebody, you know, messing with a camera. One of the activists fired an AR-15, hitting the officer in the shoulder. The officer survived. Benjamin Song, who fired the gun at the police officer, was sentenced to 100 years in prison. Song was convicted of attempted murder of an officer of the United States, as well as firearm and explosives charges, because fireworks are explosives, even though you can buy them everywhere. He was also convicted of riot, providing material support to terrorists. He faced anywhere from 20 years to life. Zachary Evans, Autumn Hill, Savannah Batten, Elizabeth Soto, and Megan Morris were sentenced to 50 years in prison.
For doing what?
Maricela Rueda, another demonstrator, was sentenced to 70 years in prison. All 6 were convicted of riot, providing material support to terrorist and explosive charges. Rueda was also convicted of corruptly concealing a document or record. I would need further explanation. They were acquitted on attempted murder and firearms charges. So let's understand this. They were acquitted of the more severe charge. That's how it works. That the attempted murder would have been the highest charge of these charges, right? And they were acquitted of that. And yet now they're looking at 50, 70, and 100 years.
Yeah, the only person who I don't have really any sympathy for is Benjamin Song, who brought an AR-15 and fired it at the cop, and he hit him. If you're going to do that, and you're going to do it on, if it's federal grounds, you're going to, especially in Texas, you're going to get what you're going to get. But if these guys are protesting, and the whole purpose is to deter people from exercising their constitutional rights, again, the culture war and the division of left versus right has grown so demonstrably over the past generation that the attitude is, well, they're a bunch of leftist hippies, so they get what they deserve. And that's the attitude, especially in a place like North Texas, which is extremely conservative.
Which is funny, though. Wait a second, because there's a bunch of leftist hippies carrying some firepower. So
that's the whole thing about Fred Hampton and what his movement is all about. People can tolerate blacks getting uppity as long as they don't have weapons. But the second they exercise their Second Amendment rights, now we have a problem. Because now we have a portion of society that is supposed to bear the brunt of the weight, so that way capitalism can continue on. And as we know, the whole purpose of this is cruelty. And as somebody's pointed out in the chat, and I think it's very astute, the thing you also have to remember about these facilities, these ICE facilities, these private prisons, these are for-profit institutions. It isn't a question of whether they get it done, like Crocodile Alley or whatever they were called.
Alligator Alcatraz.
Alligator Alcatraz, whatever. And so as a result, one of the more unheralded aspects of why that was so significant is that this is all being done by the likes of Geo Group, which is why we went ham on Wasserman Schultz when she's standing outside the facility off of I-75, claiming that she really cares about this, yet she has profited exponentially from investing in these very facilities. So the hypocrisy knows no bounds, and this is another example of how you could argue about education. You can't argue about healthcare. I won't even stand for it. But the idea that you think that there is any justification for profiting over corrections just goes to show you how stupidly privileged you truly are.
Okay, so do you want me to explain these sentences? Because now I understand why they're so long just from looking at here. So for people who do not understand this, most often judges will sentence defendants for separate counts concurrently. Here, they stack them consecutively. Now, what people need to understand, and I should know that not everybody understands. So let's say you're charged with 3 different crimes and you get convicted for all 3 of those crimes. And let's say all 3 of those crimes carry a sentence of 10 years. Well, you could be serving the 10 years for all of them at the same time. That would be concurrent. Or they can have it where you have to serve each one consecutive. So the difference would be whether you're serving 10 years or 30 years, right?
Interesting.
That's the difference. So it's significant. And apparently this is what happened, but we have an extremely compromised judicial branch as everything else right now. So the sentences handed down today made clear that Antifa terrorists, such as us, who attack law enforcement and federal facilities will face swift and uncompromising justice, said President Snow as he addressed the Capitol. Their violent extremism has no place in our country. And the Department of Justice will continue to aggressively investigate, disrupt, prosecute those who threaten Capitol enforcement officers or undermine the rule of law. In a statement, President Snow, I'm just kidding, I can't help myself. In a statement, Song said he had fired at the police officer because he had his weapon drawn and Song believed he was about to shoot a protester. All right, this is where I lose interest in the back and forth because I don't really care. Okay, so we can take this down. The point of this is that what they have done is they have taken crimes that would not normally be enhanced to the level that these were enhanced, and they're able to do so by linking it with terrorism.
Right.
So this, and again, this is the kind of shit that goes back to the Patriot Act. This is the kind of shit where W was able to label somebody an enemy combatant just because, and then that person no longer is owed 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendment rights, which is the same thing that's happening here. So you're tacking on just your subjective commentary that this is terrorism, almost like adding a hate crime, a hate crime enhancement is what that essentially does. It enhances something that was a felony. And they know it's silly, and they know it's silly.
Well, that's the name of the game. The name of the game is cruelty. That is what they are. That's what they've set out to do. That's what they are doing. However, it is important to highlight, and this has been well documented with our friends over at Status Coup. Jordan Cheriton has been covering this nonstop for months now, quite frankly. The protesters are not going to stop. If you think this is going to deter people, it's not, because there are too many people now who recognize what's happening in this country. They understand the significance of this. If you remember at an ICE facility recently, one of the stooges decided to run over one of the protesters with their car. Well, here's what happened as a result of that.
2 days, literally 2 days after being run over by a car, Alex James is out here saying, "You can't kill me. I'm going to come back here anyway."
This is the communication that not enough people are awake. Our country is in distress. Clearly, we have over 200 concentration camps in all the major cities. Chicago, LA, Oregon has them, Minnesota, New Jersey, New York. They're in your backyard right this second. Cruel to the point where they will run a lady over for waving a fucking flag. That is the senseless, unnecessary aggression that we deal with here because they feel like it.
The car didn't stop to see if you were okay. Nobody from Geo Group stopped to see if you were alive.
Geo Group. Yeah, Geo Group is so concerned about like the well-being of others.
Well, the second you hear Geo Group, and for those who don't know, Geo Group is the biggest private prison investor in the United States and a major funder of Wasserman Schultz's political career. I always like to point
out.
And
a ton of people, let's be real.
Oh,
okay, Geo Group is the largest private prison contractor in the country that I know. I mean, there's probably a lot of subgroups, but Geo is pretty massive. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I don't think that like concern for humanity is at the top of their mission statement.
Remember, so much, if not all of this, is always based on profit. This also speaks to why, for example, McConnell was always so hell-bent on ensuring that they were always getting the judges in. And what are the most important aspects of getting these for-profit conservative judges into positions of power? They hand down the type of sentences that allow Geo Group to continue making exponentially large sums of money. Everything is always connected to capital. That's the thing I want people to understand. It is not about whether you are a religious zealot, although that does matter to them, but at the end all be all is always about how can we extract the most amount of money by any means necessary. There is no line that cannot be crossed. And for-profit corrections is one of the most insidious things in the world. And we're the only country that has this, as far as I know. I think this is very unique to the United States.
Yes, it's one of those, we're number one on that issue. We're number one. So,
For sure.
Community ran to see if I was okay. A lot ran to try to stop the car, and the gate opened and the car disappeared. A report was filed, and I hear that detectives came and visited the space, and I have not heard from anyone since. The hospital visit was interesting because the doctors, they actually had to put masks on because the pepper spray that was coming off of me was so strong that everyone started coughing. After the hospital visit, I need us to go get a ton of food, head back to Delaney Hall and stand with the people and community. I need them to know that they couldn't take that away from me, that they couldn't take that away from us. Like, you don't get to make me stand down just because you felt like it. This is the apathy of the nation allowing it to occur. People need to wake up. People need to stand up. People need to say something. Imagine being taken from your family, being taken from everything that and you're building, your dreams, your goals, and being thrown in here so that you are another body making millions of dollars for a private prison.
She's right.
right. And when we look at these cases, like the terrorists, the protesters that were just convicted of obscene sentences, with the exception of the man drawing a firearm, okay, which, arguable if it was self-defense, defense of others. But I suggest that the things that they're doing are in self-defense and in defense of others, because what they are doing is standing up for all of us. That's what they're doing. They're standing up for all of us, because none of us are free until all of us are free. And these facilities are not going to only be housing the immigrants. They're not. And we've been saying this for a long time. It starts there, but it's going to creep its way up. And the next thing you know, all of us Antifa affiliated people get denaturalized and thrown in camps. So, yeah, it does matter. And I am all of those things that they did, all of that vandalism, all of that stuff. Yes, please. Yes. More of that. That's direct action. That's what we're talking about.